Aaron Rodgers gives us a vintage performance and has the Pittsburgh Steelers ready to make some noise in the AFC playoffs. That and more on today's edition of Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso with the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready, Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Football fans, welcome into the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with help from our local experts that know your favorite teams like no one else. I am your host, the madman, Tyler Rowland, joined today by Locked On NFL expert, The Legacy, Louis DiBiase. On today's episode, we're going to talk about the Seahawks and the Broncos getting the top seeds in the playoffs. We're going to talk about the Atlanta Falcons cleaning house and getting Black Monday started early, but we got to start with a vintage performance from Aaron Rodgers in a crazy game for the AFC North. Before we dive in, though, do want to thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen. Thank you for making the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network. Today's episode is sponsored by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code Locked On NFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Louis, it was a vintage performance from Aaron Rodgers that got the Steelers back to the playoffs.
Yeah, and Tyler, the Baltimore Ravens now enter the offseason with some franchise-altering questions.
Absolutely, and we go live for a recap of the game to my guy Chris Carter from Locked On Steelers, who was at the stadium.
Hey everyone, Chris Carter here from the Locked On Steelers podcast here at Acrisure Stadium, where the Steelers have just won 26-24 with the Ravens missing a game-winning field goal in the final seconds. The Steelers got a touchdown from Aaron Rodgers to Calvin Austin with under a minute to play, but Chris Boswell missed the extra point and put the game at risk. However, the Steelers defense allowed a big 4th and 7 conversion to Isaiah Likely from Lamar Jackson, who honestly had a splendid game. 3 long touchdown passes and struck against the Steelers defense, but the rookie kicker missed the field goal, and the Steelers advanced to the playoffs for the 3rd straight year in a row at 10-7. They will host the Houston Texans on Monday Night Football. We'll break it all down on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Follow us wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube.
Crazy, right at the stadium in one of the craziest games. Obviously, we'll talk about all the ins and outs, but kickers, Louis, the missed field goal from the Steelers go down. You're like, oh no, that screwed them. You know what I mean? Chris Boswell, what are you doing? And then Tyler Loop, the rookie, misses the field goal. It's not even close. He shanks it. I mean, just absolutely absurd. What an insane game. One of the best football games of the year. And quite frankly, you know, I thought both quarterbacks were absolutely clutch in this game. Take a peek behind the curtain. Before Aaron Rodgers led that final drive, I had Lamar is clutch as the title on like the YouTube thumbnails and stuff. Like both quarterbacks stepped up when their team needed them, and the kickers really decided it, but you got to give the Steelers and Aaron Rodgers credit. They scored 3 points in the first half. They put up, a ton of points in the second half, scoring 23 in the second half. With his career on the line, will I ever play another game? Aaron Rodgers was absolutely fantastic at the end.
It was such a fitting game to end the craziest NFL season, maybe of my lifetime, where only one repeat division winner is now hosting a playoff game next weekend. Aaron Rodgers
right.
Turning back the clock in the fourth quarter, Tyler. He finished 11 of 14, 133 yards, a touchdown, and a 130.1 passer rating. I mean, I know Mike Tomlin was pounding his chest, and I'll get into that later on in the show, but this was all about Aaron Rodgers, and not just him, but like Hayward on defense. This was about veterans turning back the clock in Pittsburgh, and I think that fits a nostalgic kind of day in the NFL with Myles Garrett breaking the record, the Bills' final game in the stadium, and then Rodgers doing that on Sunday night. Just a perfect way to cap off the regular season, and Pittsburgh just always seems to find a way to scratch and claw to 9-8. Like, this is just what they do, and I guess it's always going to be that way.
They 100% do. And listen, maybe I just want to believe in the Rodgers magic, but I'm looking at a matchup against the Houston Texans, like Chris Carter talked about, on Monday Night Football this week, the first round of the playoffs. And I know that the Texans' defensive front is absolutely fantastic. They could eat the Pittsburgh Steelers' offensive line alive, and Rodgers is an old man who's going to get beat and battered by the best defense in the league. However, you could counter and say no quarterback is more mentally prepared to get the ball out of their hands and to play on rhythm and to play in the time of the offense, getting DK Metcalf back and having that back. They didn't have Metcalf in these last 2 games, and they sorely missed him. That could have been a real disaster for Metcalf in his first year with the Steelers. So I think that the Steelers, I don't know that they're Super Bowl caliber, but if they can beat the Houston Texans, who knows? I don't think that it's crazy to think that Aaron Rodgers and TJ Watt and DK Metcalf and Jalen Ramsey and the star-studded Pittsburgh Steelers with Cam Hayward, I don't think it's crazy to think that they could beat the Broncos or beat the Patriots even on the road. So I think the Steelers do have the potential. I said this even before this game, so it's consistent. I said I think the Steelers are more of a playoff threat than the Baltimore Ravens. I think the Steelers had more of a chance to break through. I think it was Michelle Majuk who I did this with. She disagreed and went with the Ravens and thought they were more of a threat, and I respect that. But I think it's the Steelers, and I think this first matchup with Houston is kind of ideally suited for Rodgers to cancel out the superpower of the Texans.
Yeah, with the way he gets the ball out so quickly.
Yes.
I agree. I don't think this year's Steelers team is much different than the past teams that have been 9-8 and have slipped into the playoffs. When you look at the landscape of this year's AFC and the NFL in general, I think this year's Steelers team could do damage because you need a quarterback in such a defensive-heavy league right now. You got to play Houston's front, and then you might have to play Denver or Jacksonville or Buffalo. Like, there's so many good defensive-minded coaches, so many good defenses that having a veteran quarterback that gets the ball out quick, that doesn't make many mistakes, that's so good at throwing with anticipation, throwing against zone coverage, throwing players open, throwing to windows instead of throwing to players, like a veteran like Aaron Rodgers. I do think they could do some damage. I don't know what to make of this AFC, though. I think you could make the case for, if you said any of them made it to the Super Bowl, I'd say, okay, I get it, totally understand. I'm not surprised at all. And if you said any of them lost in the first round, I'd be like, I completely understand. And I think Pittsburgh is absolutely in that fight.
No, it's going to make for a fantastic playoffs, in my opinion, when there's so much up in the air. But I thought it was funny, like you mentioned earlier, Mike Tomlin, kind of beating his chest afterwards, like this and that. He's always ready with a good quote or to kind of hype things up. But it's been an up and down season, and let's not pretend like there weren't a lot of big questions about Mike Tomlin coming into this game.
Yeah, I totally agree. And Tomlin, look, the defense, you saw what happened in that fourth quarter. Lamar Jackson, I was wondering when he would finally start stepping up.
Yeah.
And he did. Like, those final 3 drives, that first play to Zay Flowers, the first touchdown where he splits 2 defenders, just puts it on the money down the field. And then, like, that 4th down conversion to Isaiah Likely. So many of these moments in Lamar Jackson's career, the gotta-have-it moments, he's kind of choked under pressure. And he didn't do that today.
Nope.
It took him a little bit to get going, kind of like the Bills playoff game last year. But when push came to shove, 3 straight drives, he was the reason you should have won that football game. And it's starting to feel like maybe it's just John Harbaugh thing and they need to make a head coaching change, but I'm starting to wonder if the football gods are just never going to let Lamar have his moment. Because it felt like this was that moment where he finally was, it was a legacy game, and it felt like he wasn't going to choke, and unfortunately his team choked.
No, you're right, and it's crazy because he did get it done in the clutch moments, and for such an up-and-down season to finally be like, all right, everything's gone wrong, but maybe we can make this right in the playoffs and get back, and to see Lamar make the big plays, it's like, okay, they still got it in them, but this loss, you're right, like you said at the beginning of the show, a lot of big questions about the future in Baltimore, and that's what my guy Kevin Ostreicher from Locked On Ravens focused on after the game.
What an utterly abysmal end to an abysmal season for the Baltimore Ravens. I'm Kevin Ostreicher, the host of Locked On Ravens. The Ravens fall to the Steelers, lose the AFC North, and are eliminated from the playoffs. The Ravens had a shot to win it at the end after a crazy fourth quarter, but Tyler Loop misses a 44-yard field goal. Lamar Jackson and the offense stepped up late, but the defense without Kyle Hamilton didn't even look like a pro unit out there, giving up touchdown after touchdown. This was a crazy game that had big 4th down stops, key conversions by both teams, but they couldn't beat the Ravens, a Steelers offense without DK Metcalf, and a Steelers defense that had been middling all season, and now changes have to happen for Baltimore. There are going to be a lot of conversations about John Harbaugh. They have to reshape their offensive line. They have to figure out Lamar Jackson's contract situation, a long and cold offseason ahead from a very, very disappointing Ravens season. So from Raw on the Ravens, be sure to check out the Locked On Ravens podcast and subscribe on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Look, I've been critical of Lamar at times throughout his career here on the show. I've been critical, but I think it would be crazy to give up Lamar Jackson. Now, I think John Harbaugh is a very good coach, and I don't think it would be a good idea. This is kind of a grass is greener type moment for the Baltimore Ravens. I know they've been frustrated, so maybe you just have to make change for the sake of change. I get that, but I just think John Harbaugh is a good coach. Maybe they just need to change the scenery here for both sides, but if I have to choose, I'm not getting rid of Lamar Jackson.
No, absolutely not. Lamar stepped up when it mattered most, and I don't even think he was fully healthy, Tyler. There's a reason they were running so much under center, and they weren't using Lamar as a run threat through the first 3 quarters, and that's why I was saying I know he's injured, but it's time. He needs to step up, play through that, and start making the difference, and he did in the 4th quarter. So I agree with you. Harbaugh's a good head coach, but this might be like an Eagles-Andy Reid situation where Andy goes on to Kansas City and has a legendary second act of his career, but in Philadelphia, that wasn't going to happen. I just don't know if that's going to happen again in Baltimore for Harbaugh, and I think Lamar just probably needs a change, honestly. I think the Ravens just need a change. That sometimes happens in sports where neither side is fully at fault, but you just need a new voice in that locker room.
Yeah, I think it's a reality that they have to accept, and I think it's something that we got to keep our eye on here in the next couple of days, but John Harbaugh may be fired. We know Raheem Morris is fired as the Atlanta Falcons got Black Monday started early and cleaned house. Do want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Drip Drop. Kicking off the year feeling good is the goal, right? And honestly, hydration is the easiest win. When you stay on top of it, your energy, focus, and mood all level up. But let's be real, plain water doesn't always cut it, especially when you're grinding through long days, hitting the gym, doing a ton of podcasts, or just trying to stay consistent with your health goals. That's where Drip Drop comes in. It's doctor-developed, proven fast hydration that helps your body and mind work better. You think clearer, you focus, better energy, elevated mood, even that fresh skin glow. I've been using Drip Drop as part of my daily routine. I've enjoyed it. Louis really likes Drip Drop. We were talking about our favorite flavors right before the show. Louis is a big strawberry lemonade guy. I like the grape. And right now, Drip Drop is offering our listeners 20% off your first order. Go to dripdrop.com. Use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL. That's dripdrop.com, promo code LOCKEDONNFL for 20% off. Stock up now at dripdrop.com and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL. Today's episode is also brought to you by Prize Picks. Whether you're starting a new routine or you're jumping into player projections for the first time, trying something new can feel like a challenge, but with Prize Picks, it always feels good to be right. With high-pressure football matchups every weekend, you got elite hoops games almost every night. The action never slows down, and Prize Picks lets you stay in control. Prize Picks is the daily fantasy app that makes watching sports even more exciting by letting you build lineups based on player projections. No drafts, no waiting, just pick more or less and play your way. Getting started on Prize Picks is quick, it's simple. They have a ton of awesome features like their flex play, where you could still get paid even if one pick misses, or their early payouts feature that's a game changer. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. It's Prize Picks. It's good to be right. All right, Louis, let's continue today's edition of Locked On NFL, breaking down a wild Week 18 to close out the regular season. Aaron Rodgers has a vintage performance. I think the Steelers can make some moves in the playoffs, and the Ravens have a lot of questions ahead, but the Falcons also have a lot of questions ahead as they get things rolling early. Fire their general manager, Terry Fontenot. Fire their head coach, Raheem Morris. And my guy, Aaron Freeman from Locked On Falcons, thinks it was time to go ahead and do that.
This was the right move for the Falcons. Morris made a number of missteps, probably the biggest one being too confident in the roster that Fontenot had built, that he inherited in 2024, with the belief that adding quarterbacks Kirk Cousins and Michael Penix would be the final piece to lift the team over the hump. And in their now 8-year playoff drought, didn't prove to be the case. Morris made questionable coordinator hires, had poor in-game management, and, there was really no justification to keeping Morris. His teams shine brightly in primetime, but really struggled when the lights weren't brightest. And despite this late season surge, there was no reason to think that the results in 2026 were going to be drastically improved.
Listen, I got to tell you, Louis, I think that they went 1 for 2 with this. I don't think that Raheem Morris is an incredible coach by any stretch of the imagination, but the Michael Penix situation with the injury, Kirk Cousins getting faded back in, Drake London was banged up for a while. I'm not trying to say that Raheem Morris is a great coach, but I think he'd done enough to deserve another year. And I think the reality here is I think Arthur Blank, the owner of the Falcons, like a lot of owners do, wanted to just go ahead and do a clean sweep and bring in a new general manager and let him pick his new head coach or however they want to set that up. A lot of people don't like having an arranged marriage, as they say, where you have a leftover GM or a leftover coach and you pair him with someone new. And a lot of times that just doesn't work out. So I get if that's the strategy there, but I think that Raheem Morris, his guys played for him at the end. They won 4 games here to finish the season and ended up really affecting the division and getting Carolina in, even though Tampa won. And we'll talk more about that in a moment. But, I guess I'm just not gung-ho to be like, oh, yeah, those guys did a terrible job, because although Fontenot really messed up with the quarterback situation, he's actually done some pretty good things too.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, is Fontenot's actually, to me, the more interesting decision. And I get it. Like, when you don't get quarterback right, it doesn't really matter what else you do. And the Penix Cousins thing was a disaster. But you look at the roster, and the Falcons are going to have 2 of probably the top 3, top 4 defensive rookie of the year candidate on the defensive side of the football. They went from last year in sacks to second, like the Pearson Walker picks in the first round. It did work. You fixed the biggest issue from last year. But the biggest issue in the NFL is when you don't have a quarterback. And that is ultimately, I think, why both the head coach and the GM got fired, because Atlanta has underperformed. I picked them to make the playoffs this year for a reason.
So much talent.
They have so much talent on both sides of the ball, so many great weapons. I mean, Bijan Robinson has over 2,000 yards from scrimmage. They had no business losing this division title in a year where a team that was under 500 won it. So I understand the decision, but I do think whoever inherits this roster with the Falcons, if they just get quarterback right, this could be a sleeping giant in the NFC. This is a really favorable or enticing job, I would say, as a coach and a GM.
No, I agree 100%. I mean, look, you're talking about what they've done on defense with Xavier Watts. Think Jesse Bates was a guy that Fontenot brought over.
Right.
James Pierce he has the most sacks for a rookie for the Atlanta Falcons. Like you said with the sacks, they had been the last in the NFL in sacks the last 20 years, the last 10 years, the last 5 years, and last year. And look how they've turned it around with their draft picks. So Fontenot had put together a pretty good competitive roster, but there's some reports out there that ownership was promised something that they weren't delivered on. And you wonder whether that's related to the quarterback situation. Like they were promised that they weren't going to take a quarterback, and they did. We were talking before we started recording about that video from draft night with Michael Penix, where Arthur Blank and Terry Fontenot were having I wouldn't say they're arguing. I don't even want to call it an intense conversation, but Fontenot seems like he's really trying to sell Arthur Blank on something or persuade him in some way. It's just clear they're not seeing eye to eye. And you wonder whether maybe Arthur Blank was caught off guard by something that Fontenot did there. Maybe they hadn't discussed that. Maybe it's just purely as simple as he guaranteed that they were going to make the playoffs, blah, 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 and they didn't, and that, it's something like that. But either way, there's definitely a disconnect between the general manager and the front office and what was promised to Arthur Blank. And again, I think it's kind of a baby with the bathwater situation.
I'm almost curious if Kirk Cousins' strong end to the season had anything to do with it, where maybe he was thrown off when they took Penix and he thought Cousins was going to be the guy. I don't know. You're right. Something happened. I really do think it had to do with quarterback, because nothing else about this team looks like, oh, they're 3 to 4 years away. I think they are a quarterback away, and maybe that is what happened. Blank feels like we shouldn't be a quarterback away based on what you promised. So it's always about that position, man, in the NFL, push comes to shove.
No, I agree, but I agree with you. It should be a very enticing landing spot for potential head coaching
in a
candidates.
Bad division with a good roster on both sides.
Bad division,
I would want
good
that
roster.
job. Yeah,
100%. And Everyone's so mad at the last two guys for not getting things done. You get this team to the playoffs, they're going to treat you like a hero. You know what I mean? Like the owner's going to be so happy. Like now coming in with expectations that you got to make the playoffs to make anybody happy is tough, but boy, you got a lot to work with right there. But staying in the NFC and staying in the NFC South, one of the positions that was up for grabs was the NFC South division. And although they lost on Saturday, the Atlanta Falcons beating the Saints gets the Carolina Panthers in, as my guy Julian Council from Locked On Panthers talked about.
The Panthers did it the hard way, but they're in the playoffs for the first time in 8 years and win the NFC South division title for the first time in a decade, thanks to some help from their friends down in Atlanta. Hi, I'm Julian Council, host of Locked On Panthers, and that's right, Uptown Charlotte will see playoff football for the first time in a decade sometime this weekend as the Panthers win the NFC South, and it wasn't easy. They had opportunities against the Saints that they blew, against the Bucs on Saturday that they blew, against Seattle a week ago that they blew. And despite blowing every chance to do it on their own, Atlanta gets them as the Panthers win a 8-9 three-way tiebreaker in the NFC South, winning because of a head-to-head record, 3-1 against Tampa and against the Atlanta Falcons. And now they get an opportunity to be in the dance. And there's plenty of teams that shouldn't be in the playoffs we see every year, but they find a way to win games. Not saying Carolina's going to be one of those teams that wins, but who can count them out after wins against Green Bay and against the Rams earlier on this season? Big for Bryce Young, big for Dave Canales and Dan Morgan, the second year of their head coach GM partnership here in Carolina, and big for the owner, David Tepper, after all of the mistakes he's made over the last 8 years, that finally this team is back in the playoffs. For more on the Panthers playoff appearance this weekend and more, tune in to Locked On Panthers on YouTube and wherever you listen to your favorite podcast.
Who's to say the Panthers I'm the one to say the Panthers. I'm sorry, there's no way they're beating the Rams twice. Now you get the Los Angeles Rams. You got, a good win earlier in the year on them. There is no way they are beating the Rams twice. I think the Rams are going to win by 30 in this one. Good for the Falcons. They can chalk this up good for the Panthers.
Yeah.
They could chalk this up as a successful year. They have the right head coach. Still don't know about that quarterback, but they're getting better and they have a good head coach. So I think you should be excited if you're the Panthers, but let's not pretend like this is a serious football team.
No, it's a really cool story, but also who they drew in the first round is the most complete, consistent team of the NFC this year with the best quarterback. So, yeah, I mean, it was a fun first win against LA this year, but to beat them twice, even at home, I think is pretty unrealistic. But yeah, it's a good feel-good story for Carolina that's just been in the dark, especially with the way, Bryce Young was benched last year, and to come back and slowly improve and to win the division. I'm with you. I still have question marks about him long-term, but Canales has that team, I think, going in the right direction, especially on the defensive side of the football. They have some good pieces on offense, too. So it's a good season for the Panthers, and I think it'll stop next week.
No, I'm with you there, too. And also, we'll talk more about it later this week, but Tetairoa McMillan should be the offensive rookie of the year. He's been excellent, and Tyler Shuck only played half the year. So with that being said, though, you look at the NFC playoff picture. Seattle gets the number 1 seed in the bye with a win over San Francisco on Saturday night. Like we said, that puts the Rams in the 5 seed against the Carolina Panthers. That leaves the Chicago Bears against the Green Bay Packers. Louis, your Eagles against the San Francisco 49ers. 2 fantastic games, but I got to say I'm more intrigued by the Chicago Bears versus the Packers. That was a game that I wanted to see when I talked last week with Michelle Majuk, the data queen, about what matchups I wanted to see in the playoffs. I wanted to see a third matchup of the Packers against the Bears. The Bears lost to the Lions in a close one. The Packers got rolled, not playing any other real players in that game. But I think that's going to be a banger, but a good NFC start to the playoffs outside of that Rams-Panthers slaughter that's going to happen.
I think I said it on the show a couple weeks ago, but whoever gets through the NFC this year, you earned a trip to Super Bowl 60. I mean, this is a really tough one, and again, a division winner has to host the Rams. I mean, the NFC West was unbelievable this year. So, yeah, both games, I mean, Eagles 49ers is going to be great, too. That's been 2 of the most consistent teams, if not the 2 most consistent teams in this conference over the last decade. So, yeah, that's a gauntlet conference. And it's, again, this is the most wide-open playoff bracket that I've seen in a very long, probably since 2017.
And let me just say this. How great for the Los Angeles Rams. You get to play the Panthers, and then after that, I think that there's a high likelihood that one of San Francisco or Green Bay win.
Yeah.
So they'll probably have to play Seattle, and then you'll get whoever wins out of Chicago or Philly, which is infinitely easier than Seattle, in my opinion. Like, the Rams are just in a really good spot right now. But with that in mind, we move to the AFC, where the Denver Broncos pull off the top seed in the conference. But I got to tell you, they aren't the team that I think is most dangerous. Today's episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. The new year doesn't require a new you, maybe just a less burdened you. We all carry things that weigh us down or hold us back, and therapy can help you identify what those things are by offering an unbiased perspective to better understand your relationships, motivations, and emotions. That's where BetterHelp comes in, making it easy to get matched online with a qualified therapist who can work with you to figure out what's holding you back. Maybe it's fear, pressure, perfection, or doubt that's weighing you down. Either way, BetterHelp has therapists that are fully licensed in the U.S. and work according to a strict code of conduct. And if you're not happy with your match, you can switch to a different therapist at any time. And that's my favorite feature, because I think when you do therapy, you need to make sure that you have the right person for you, and BetterHelp makes that super, super easy. BetterHelp makes it easy to get matched online with a qualified therapist. Sign up and get 10% off at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Today's episode is also brought to you by Game Time. The NFL season is obviously in full swing, and there's nothing better than being at the game. You get the crowd noise, the energy, the fans cheering alongside you. Watching it at home is great, but being in the stadium hits different, especially in the playoffs. The frustrating part, though, has always been getting tickets. You got to wait in queues. You got to deal with logins. You got to deal with the price changing right at checkout. That's why the Game Time app gives the advantage back to fans. It's the hack for unlocking amazing NFL tickets and experiences in just a few taps. They have the best features in the industry. You get a panoramic view from your seat, so you know what you're going to be looking at before you buy. You get zone deals where you can pick a section and Game Time will pick the seats, and you save even more. All the fees are included up front, so the price you see is the price that you pay, and everything is backed by the Game Time guarantee, so you have real peace of mind. Take the guesswork out of buying NFL tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL, that's LOCKEDON NFL, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today and get back to being there live. All right, Louie, let's cap off today's edition of Locked On NFL. We talked about Rodgers' vintage performance against the Ravens. We talked about the questions with the Ravens, the NFC playoff picture, the Falcons cleaning house. Now we got to move to the AFC, where the Denver Broncos pulled off the top seed, but I don't think that they're the most dangerous team in the conference. I do want to thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen. Thank you for making the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network. But again, the Denver Broncos get it done like we've seen for most of the year, though. It was an ugly get it done, which leaves a lot of room for improvement for the Broncos, as my guy Cody Rart from Locked On Broncos talked about after the game.
The Denver Broncos are the #1 seed in the AFC playoffs, but there is plenty of room for improvement as they'll open up with the divisional round opponent to be determined here. Denver's 14-3 season captured, I think, the resilience of a Sean Payton-led football team, and there's been some highs and lows. The offense has had some good moments. The defense carried the water for a large portion of the regular season, but now when the playoffs get here, their room for error is very minimal. Sunday's win was big for the Broncos in terms of securing home field advantage, but the offense cannot play the way that it did in the playoffs, or else they could face an early one and done. They have to overcome that. For more, make sure you stay tuned. Locked On Broncos.
I just got to say, I love getting updates from our Locked On NFL experts live from the scene. You can hear the sounds of the environment. Really brings me back to the old school journalism background that I came from here. But
Big J
either way,
journalism.
There you go. Big J, journalism. We're out here, journos. But with that being said, good for Denver. They got it done. But like with Denver, we've seen all season long, just not a very convincing victory, even though the score is convincing, like 19-3. Looks good, and they played against Trey Lance, and he wasn't that good. But Bo Nix just wasn't very consistent in this game. It wasn't very clean, and they won because the Chargers sat everybody. But it's hard to watch the Broncos week to week and have faith that they're a real football team that can contend for a title, even getting the bye and getting the number 1 seed.
They kind of remind me of, they're the AFC's version of the Philadelphia Eagles, right? Where they just keep finding a way at the end each and every game, and it's messy, and it's normally led by
so
the defense. But yet they keep finding a way, and I don't know, like in the playoffs, that really does matter when things tighten up and defenses get even better. I don't trust them. Like, they're not my favorite team to come out of the AFC. I think there's at least 3 or 4 other teams that I'd predict over them, but their formula, I think, does translate pretty well for the postseason. So I wouldn't be surprised at all. Again, like I said earlier on the show, you could make the argument for any of these teams getting to the Super Bowl and any of them getting upset in round 1. I just wouldn't be shocked. And even though Denver's the 1 seed, they are in that category as well.
No, I agree 100%. It would not be a shock whatsoever to see them go down. And depending on what happens, like the next matchup that I want to talk about as we look at, Denver got the number 1 seed, but New England gets the number 2. They're going to play the Los Angeles Chargers. Then the Jaguars get the number 3. They're going to play the Buffalo Bills. We talked already about the Houston matchup against the Steelers now with the 4 or 5. But looking at that Jacksonville Jaguars Buffalo Bills matchup, I think that one is one that's going to be very, very exciting. And Jacksonville did it. I called it. They paid it off. I knew it all along. Jacksonville won the AFC South. My guy Tony Wiggins from Locked On Jags broke it down.
And just like that, the Jacksonville Jaguars are the AFC South champs at 13-4 with a dominant performance today against the Tennessee Titans. And that part of it was expected, but it was still even a lot more dominant than that after a little bit of a slow start on the first couple of drives. The Jaguars then just totally turned it on, dominated the game, and go into the playoffs on a very high note. Right now, they're the 3 seed, waiting on both New England and Denver to complete their games. The number 1 seed is still on the table, a little bit unlikely. Maybe they get to the number 2 seed. But right now, the Jaguars are still going to host a playoff game the first week of the playoffs this year. Trevor Lawrence was absolutely great again, and now everyone's going to start noticing it around the National Football League, and I've been saying it all year on Locked On Jaguars. Tune in to Locked On Jaguars for more about the Jaguars' magical season, and they're headed to the playoffs as AFC South champs.
Listen, you go out there and you beat Josh Allen in a playoff game in 4K in front of the nation. I think people are really going to start talking about Trevor Lawrence because people are already excited and ready to crown Trevor Lawrence anytime he does anything. They're ready to pat him on the head and say, good boy. And he's actually deserved it this year. So with him actually deserving it, actually playing fantastic, they whooped the Tennessee Titans up and down the field. With all of that in mind, if he goes out and beats Josh Allen, people are going to start talking crazy about Trevor Lawrence.
I think the winner of this game is coming out of the AFC. I think these are the 2 teams that I probably trust the most.
Yeah.
And the Jaguars, I think, match up really well against the Bills and what they do best, which is run the football with the rushing title winner, James Cook. But Jacksonville is so good against the run, and their defense forces turnovers on the weekly. And with the way Josh Allen sometimes plays football, I don't know. This is a tough matchup, a tough pull for the Bills in round 1. But I trust both these teams that whoever wins this one, it's such a toss-up, but that might be who I call getting out of the conference.
And trying to predict, the path here, again, Buffalo. A great – if they're able to win this game against Jacksonville, a team that they have much more playoff experience than, a coach that has way more playoff experience than the other team, a team that historically does stupid stuff and messes up in Jacksonville. If they're able to beat Jacksonville, I don't think that the Chargers are beating the Patriots. Personally, I don't see that happening. I think the Patriots are going to handily win that game. So if that happens, that means that Buffalo is going to be the team that gets to play Denver. And look, Denver's not a pushover. Going into Denver is hard, that defense and everything. I'm just saying, would you rather play Houston, New England, or Denver in the next round? And to me, my answer is Denver.
Denver for sure. I mean, the ideal scenario for the Bills is that the Chargers beat the Patriots and the Steelers beat the Texans. Then you get to go to Pittsburgh. But
yeah,
I don't think that's that's probably not very
And then the
realistic.
Chargers win, and then you get a home game against
so that's
the Chargers.
the ideal
and
one.
then, that
but
would
I
be
agree.
perfect,
Like in the realistic world of what's the best case scenario, the Bills winning and going to Denver is probably the best path for Josh Allen to get back to the AFC title. And then from there, it's his time to take it. Lamar Jackson's legacy moment today didn't work out. Now you look at the playoff landscape. Josh is like that next guy that doesn't have a ring that you're waiting for him to get that ring. So it's fun, though. There's only 3 quarterbacks in this bracket of 14 teams that have won a Super Bowl. It's Jalen Hurts, Matt Stafford, and Aaron Rodgers now sneaks in. So I think there's a lot of fun storylines that could play out. I can't wait.
Can't wait as well. That's going to do it for today's edition of Locked On NFL. I am your host, the Madman, Tyler Rowland, for my co-host, the Legacy, Louis DiBiase. As I tell you every episode, thanks for tuning in, and stay safe out there.